So I want to welcome everyone to this lecture series on the Diamond Sutra. And I'm really excited about teaching it because the Diamond Sutra is my favorite sutra in the whole world. But before I get started, I want to do two things. One is I want to move these books out of my way, and I'm going to have to be one of these talking heads that moves out of sight every once in a while, but there's a lovely view behind me that you can all look at when I lean down to get my books, but there are too many books in my way, so here we go. My name is Geri Larkin, and I have been a student of Zen for a very long time, since 1988, in fact. And I was brought to this path via an eye twitch. And I've told this story ad nauseum, but I think for those of you who don't know me, it might be a useful introduction. I was working as a management consultant, and my eyes started twitching, and I went to an eye doctor for some Band-Aids to hold my eyes in place while I did my work. And she thought I was pretty funny and suggested that I take a meditation class. And in 1988, meditation wasn't something that people talked about. So things have really changed radically in the last 30 or 40 years. In the Midwest, anyway, nobody talked about meditation. So I actually thought she told me to take a mediation class and figured I was already pretty good arguing with myself. Even at that point, I knew that my mind was pretty monkey mindish. But I found a meditation class and it changed my life. I mean, it really, really changed my life. So I went from having eye twitches in both eyes to not having any eye twitches within a 3-week period. And the only thing I had changed in my life was meditation. So I was on my way. Since then, I've lived in several temples, sometimes for years at a time. And I was ordained as a Dharma teacher almost 20 years ago now. I find it hard to believe because I'd like to think that I'm 42 and a half, but since I've been thinking that for at least 20 years now, it's been a long time. I've been a teacher for a long, long time, and I've learned a lot. One of the things about being a Dharma teacher is that you learn as much as you teach, if you teach at all, in fact. So I'm really thrilled to be a part of all of this path that I call the way of wisdom and heart opening. My tradition is a Korean tradition. I studied with Venerable Samu Sunam for quite a while until 1999 and went on a Korean pilgrimage with him at that point where I decided that it would be okay for me to go off into a slightly different direction, always staying true to the Chogyey Korean path, but heading out to work with different teachers, mostly teachers who have been part of the lineage of Sungsan Sunam, and they've been really wonderful. And they kick my butt all the time with koan practice, so I'm really grateful for all of that. When I came back from the Korean pilgrimage, I started a temple in Detroit, the Still Point Zen Buddhist Temple, and was the guiding teacher there for 5 years, and have written books along the way, starting with the Stumbling Toward Enlightenment and moving to Close to the Ground. Stumbling Toward Enlightenment is a book that it would be okay with me to have not be on any shelves anymore because I wrote it when I was just starting and made way too many promises. Mostly because my life changed so quickly, so radically from all this practice that I thought, well, I'll just tell everybody all the secrets I learned in the first couple of years, then we'll all be wide awake and live happy ever after, and that'll be that. And of course, as you all know, if you're practicing, it doesn't actually work like that. That opening up has a lot more to do with seeing our own foibles, and if we're lucky, seeing how funny they are than anything else. So calmness takes a lot of energy and effort, and emptiness in particular takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. The most recent book is Close to the Ground, which is a book about the 7 factors of enlightenment. And I actually hadn't written anything for a long time, but a friend of mine in Minneapolis insisted that I take some Dharma talks and turn them into a series of teachings about the 7 factors of enlightenment. And in his words, you know, we're all really good at all the downside of life, but we forget about the upsides. And the 7 factors, joy and curiosity, are parts of our lives that are important to remember. And they're actually particularly important when we study something like the Diamond Sutra. So that's enough about me. I bore myself with my own life now, so I'll just keep moving. One last thing, actually, before I move on to the sutras, I have been thinking a lot about why I'm the person doing this lecture series. And one reason is that the Diamond Sutra included women in the teaching. And that, I think, is a really important thing to remember along this path, that it's a path that's deeply inclusive on a lot of levels. So as a woman, I have to say that when I read the Diamond Sutra the first time and saw that women were included, it was helpful to me, particularly coming out of an Asian tradition, which felt very male to me for all those years. And I think the second thing about Geri Larkin being the teacher here is that in my own inimitable way, I'm living proof that this path works, that it really is a path to happiness. Peace, not so much, but definitely a path to happiness. And when I think of myself now, compared to what I was like in 1988, it's really an incredible change. And it is a path to what I'll call awareness. I know a lot of people talk about awakeness and waking up and enlightenment, but my experience with this path, my own experience with this path, is that it's a path of emerging awareness, and that's where our capacity to help the world comes from and grows out of. All right, so now I'm done. The Diamond Sutra. Why the Diamond Sutra? I think more than anything else for me, the Diamond Sutra is one of those sutra that is a one-size-fits-all sutra. It's one of those teachings that has something for everyone, and it starts from being a great story to being a teaching that moves us through the paramitas into emptiness, and along the way it becomes deeply experiential. I know that for me, the first time I read it, I actually wept. And I wept with gratitude that it even existed, because something in me responded experientially to the teaching itself. And I think that's really something special about the Diamond Sutra. And what's been interesting to me over all these years now is that I've never lost that great love for this particular sutra. And I expect that there's something for everyone in different sutras, that we all have a sutra that just speaks to our hearts more than other ones. And the Diamond Sutra for me is the one that really speaks to my heart. It's never let me down. And if I wasn't so afraid of physical pain, I'd probably tattoo it all over my body, but there it is. So it's going to have to stay in book form, at least for me. All right, I'm going to duck down for water. So before I talk you through the outline of the course, I want to clarify what I think the role of a teacher is in teaching anyone about this tradition. I think more than any other role, what we are is really placeholders. What we do is we give people an opportunity to really sink into a sutra just because we're kind of walking beside you along this path. And so that's what I hope I'll be able to do for you, is to be really more than anything else a placeholder and a pointer. At worst, if you go through this lecture series with me, you'll learn a lot about mindfulness and about the perfections or the paramitas. Many of you will get a taste of emptiness just from reading the Diamond Sutra over again. I should say over and over again, because I'm going to ask you to do that. And for a lot of you, what will happen is you'll start to see more and more, or feel more and more, the connection between Buddhist teachings and this whole experience of bodhisattvaness. And I'll talk about that more as we go along. If I've learned anything about the path, it's that the truth can't be learned from someone else. And it's something that I actually am grateful for, but especially the truth can't be learned from me, because I'm an old person talking to you from the Northwest who is kind of moving into the last part of my life. And I'm guessing a lot of you are moving into more of a beginning adulthood or a middle adulthood. Having said that, truth is a given fact. I mean, truth is. So again, I'll do my best to point. I'll bring out concepts that I think are useful. At least they've been useful to me, so I'll assume that they're going to be useful to you too. I'll bring up things that have been helpful for me anyway to consider. But everything else is up to you. And I guarantee I'll speak too fast sometimes because I get excited about all of this. And as I was thinking about the lecture series, it was occurring to me that what I'm trying to do is like trying to explain to you what it feels like to taste an apple. And I'll describe it in all these myriad of ways, but the fact is you have to bite the apple yourself. So in a way that gives me permission to do my best and then say it's all up to you. So I'll just give myself a you did your best pat on the back now and keep moving. So I think that's about enough for an introduction here. If you don't do anything else during this course, and I'll suggest homework assignments as I think about this for those of you who like me just want to do homework. But the more you can read the sutra as we move through the lectures, I think the more helpful the lectures will be to you. I used to read it every day, and for one full year when I was in the Maitreya Buddhist seminary, I had to read it every day as fast as I could. And what was interesting to me was that the point of that instruction was for me to feel the sutra rather than to understand it. And I think that was a great, great instruction. I know it really, really helps me a lot. All right, so let me move on to the outline of the course for those of you who aren't sure if you want to hang in there with me or not. And then what I want to do is talk a little bit about the history of the sutra itself. I mean, the story of the sutra is a pretty amazing story, where it came from. And then what I want to end with is just a quick little description of 5 concepts that are really important to remember as we move through the sutra together. So again, this is a 9-part lecture series, and this is lecture 1. Lecture 2 will be a lecture where I'll start with reading sections 1 through 4 out loud. Again, I don't know if all of you can get a hold of the Diamond Sutra. If you can, that's wonderful. But if you can't, I don't want you to be left out of the lecture series. So I'll read parts of it when I start each of the lectures. And the book that I'm using, I actually have lots of copies of the Diamond Sutra, and I've loved all of them. But the one that I decided would work, I think really work the best for this particular lecture series is the Red Pine book on the Diamond Sutra. I have to say I bow to the ground to Red Pine every day because he's given this path and he's given all of us so much. I covered it so I can't show you the cover, but here's the front page. And let me sit. I hope you can all see this. So it's the Diamond Sutra, the Perfection of Wisdom, text and commentaries translated from Sanskrit and Chinese by Red Pine. And it comes out from, it's been published by Counterpoint. And you should see, you can tell how much I love the sutra. Look at these notes. Is that unbelievable? I'm one of those people who has to write in books that I love. Mea culpa, but I have notes all the way through this sutra. It's pretty incredible when I look at it. And what's really funny about this is I can kind of tell what moods I was in when I read it. So times when I was really studying hard, you'll see I have lots of ink marks. And then times where I felt like, oh, I should read it because I haven't read it for a while. I don't know if I can find this. There's some pencil marks. And then for when I'm really, really serious, you see lots of red ink. So the Red Pine book is the book, if you can get a hold of, that again I'll be using through the lecture series. It doesn't really matter which of the translations you use. What matters is that you read it. All right. So lecture 2, I'll read sections 1 through 4. And I'll then talk about the basic storyline of the sutra because it's a good story. It's actually a great story. Then some themes, and with each lecture I'll cover different themes of the sutra. So for lecture 2, the themes will be the ballet of ordinariness. And that's a huge teaching all by itself. One of the things I think we miss, especially in the Western world, is the great beauty of ordinary life. And when we really stop to pay attention to it, it's as exquisitely beautiful as any ballet, at least I've ever seen, but we forget. And the Diamond Sutra starts out with this ballet of deep ordinariness on the part of Buddha. And again, when I first read it, part of what made me weep is I realized that this is a path that's not about being special. In fact, it's a path about being exactly the opposite of special. But like so many of the teachings in Buddhism, there's always this great explosive surprise in the teaching. And the great explosive surprise here is that this ordinary day is so beautiful that when we really, really pay attention to it, our hearts burst open. It's incredible. So in Lecture 2, Mindfulness, we'll talk about mindfulness. I have studied mindfulness all my adult life. I suck at it, but even in my sucking at it, I get slightly better with every passing year. For my next life, hopefully I'll get better at mindfulness, but every time I see my stove still on, after I've finished a meal, I know there's work to be done. But the Diamond Sutra, again, is a study of mindfulness, and it really, again and again, reminds us how important that is. Compassion is a component of the Diamond Sutra. We'll cover that in Lecture 2. Fearlessness. One of the things about this path is that sooner or later we have to decide that we're willing to be fearless and really looking at everything about ourselves and about the world that surrounds us if we're going to move through our own conditioning. Nirvana, a little bit on Nirvana, and I've already talked about the inclusion of women, but again, I'll mention it again in Lecture 2 just because I am one. And after that, I'll try to leave it alone if I can. No promises. Lecture 3, I'll read sections 5 through 8 and cover themes like the meaning of faith in the Buddhist tradition. Faith in this tradition is very different from faith in other traditions. And ironically, we're asked to really have faith in ourselves, and then everything follows from that. And that's a big component in the Diamond Sutra. I'll talk a little bit about promises related to memorizing and sharing 4 lines of the teaching, and ask you in Lecture 3 to really think about what would you choose. I mean, if you only memorized 4 lines, what 4 lines would they be? The problem with labels, I'll cover in Lecture 3. Again, it's one of the problems with teaching, a lot of times what we do is we put labels on things as a shortcut. And we have to, otherwise, at least for these lectures, they would go on ad nauseum. But there's a problem with labels because they really cut off the completeness of a teaching. And then a little discussion of merit. And merit to me is just one of these hilarious concepts. It's like, here we are saying, oh, it doesn't matter to us, but oh, really, there's some merit? So we'll see about that. The main thing is if you're one of these people who wants to rack up merit, then you want to memorize as much of the sutra as you can and spew it off as often as you can to as many people as you can include. So good luck with that merit. Who knows? Okay. Lecture 4, sections 9 through 12, themes with Lecture 4, the inherent universal impulse to worship something. And that's an important thing to think about. We do have an inherent impulse to worship something. In a lot of ways, it's what gets us all in trouble. And then in other ways, it's what gets us sitting on a cushion every day if we do that. So thinking about this universal impulse and not making it something that's a negative, but really owning it and looking at how we basically transform our own impulses to worship into a practice that's useful not just to ourselves, but to the world around us. Why the diamond metaphor? I'll talk a little bit about that, maybe even today for maybe 2 minutes. But the diamond metaphor is actually really critical here. It's one of the things about the Diamond Sutra that makes it stand out in my mind. And again, when I read it, I fell so in love with the sutra that I actually went out and bought myself, here, I'll show it. Can you see it? I hope you can all see it. A diamond ring that I've worn ever since then, just to remind myself about the importance of the sutra to my own life. And what's interesting about this little ring is just with the shininess of it and how it catches the light and it makes the light bounce off all over the place on things. It just reminds me of how interconnected everything is and how immutable that interconnection is. So the diamond metaphor really matters. I guess it'd be okay if it was called the mud ball metaphor, but there's something about being called the diamond metaphor that is really striking. The role of Subhuti in this lecture is something I'll cover, and the paramitas. It's going to take me a lot of willpower to save the paramitas to lecture 4, but I'll do my best here. Lecture 5, and again, it's a 9-part lecture series, and I apologize if those of you have been able to get a hold of this outline in some other way, but again, for those of you who haven't, I just need to go through this outline, and then you'll have it. Lecture 5, I'll read sections 13 to 16. I get a little gutsy here, start to get courageous. The first theme is, who is no one? Who is no one? Who is no one? Comments on Buddha as ordinary, why no formula matters, just the problem with particular formulas. You know, I think we've done a pretty good job, at least my experience is that we've done a pretty good job not getting too caught in formulas in this tradition, but our tendency, in the same way that we have this tendency to want to worship something, is our tendency is to want formulas. And it's one thing to have to find a formula that works for me, but it's another thing to try to propose that this particular formula works for anyone else, because it doesn't. So I'll talk about that a little bit in lecture 5. The unreality of phenomenal distinctions. Again, once you have a taste of this, of the unreality of phenomenal distinctions, at least for me, I had 2 reactions to this. One was to laugh so hard that I had tears streaming down my cheeks, and one was to be scared out of my wits by it. So phenomenal distinctions are something that's useful just to be able to function in the world, but the fact is it's unreal. I mean, it really is unreal. You can see this from your own experience, but I'll talk about it a little bit in lecture 5. And again, what words are good for in lecture 5, here we are together sharing what words are good for, again, mostly as pointers. At the end of lecture 5, if I were teaching this course in a formal university setting, I would give you an exam. And so let me just say that if we were sharing this lecture series together in that kind of a setting, what the exam would be is this. For those of you who are impulsive exam takers, here's what I would have given you. I would have asked you to take 4 lines of the sutra and memorize them. And then I would ask you to consider why these 4 lines. How do you expect them to play out as a part of your bodhisattva vow? So it's something to consider as we go through those first 5 lectures. What 4 lines are the 4 lines that really pop out at you when you read the Diamond Sutra? For me, when I was reading it every day for that year, there were 4 lines that came out at me the entire year, and they never changed, and they were the last 4 lines of the sutra. So it'll be interesting to see, for you to see with your own experience, what are the lines that come out for you. All right, 4 more lectures, and then I'll go back to talking a little bit more about the Diamond Sutra, the history of the Diamond Sutra itself. So lecture 6, we'll go through sections 17 through 20, and then the themes, the Heart Sutra connection. It'll be really clear to those of you who know the Heart Sutra how connected these 2 sutras are early on, but I want to talk about it a little bit in lecture 6. The role of good works, what a good work really is, and why it's important for good works to even exist. Thinking more about what it means to give up I, this I that we all cling to, sometimes more dramatically than others. And then finally in lecture 6, I want to talk a little bit about emptiness as a raft. Emptiness is a raft. So emptiness is not the end point of this path. I think it's really important, and the Diamond Sutra does a great job here with pointing out how emptiness is only a raft. That's it. It gets us to the complete awareness or the complete awakeness, but that's all it is. Lecture 7, section 21 to 24, themes. This one I hate, but I'm going to talk about it. Why we can't control our awakenings. I'm one of those people who, when I first started to practice seriously, when I say seriously, I mean seriously. I lived in a temple and was like Zen mud. I mean, I just was practicing in the morning, chanting through the day, doing mindfulness practice while I worked, doing practice at night, going to sleep, doing my sutras, chanting myself to sleep. And the reason why I was doing it is because I was determined to be wide awake within a year. Figured I'd take a year, wake up completely, and go back into my life a wiser person. And the fact is, it totally didn't work. I just made myself so obnoxious to all the people around me that I cannot believe I still have any friends today. So let me encourage you, and I'll encourage you more in Lecture 7, to give up any kind of inkling deep in your heart, not just mental inkling, but inkling in your heart that you have any control at all about your own spiritual maturity, because you don't. The only thing we can do is our practice and keep our hearts as open as we can. And the Diamond Sutra is one of those sutras that helps us do that. So the other thing I want to talk about mostly in Lecture 7 is the implications of this truth that we can't control our own awakenings. For our practice, what does that mean? Sun used to say, try for 10,000 years. And that's actually a great way to think about all of this, is just to try without any deadline. The perils of attainment. And there have been lots and lots of stories about the perils of attainment here. Maybe it's a human thing to want to brag. I know it is for my family. But one of the things about attainment is that a small taste goes a long way in the bragging department, and that's really a problem. And we need to be careful about that and about in ourselves, because the fact is that anybody who practices for a long time will have their own tastes and they will become more aware. It's just part of this path. A sincere practitioner does wake up. It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Now let me say this. Everybody wakes up anyway. So it's just a matter of time. It's almost like, somebody once said to me, well, if you practice hard, you just kind of increase the probability that you'll wake up slightly sooner. So we need to really think hard about why do we do our practice. And the Diamond Sutra has a lot to say about this. The perils of attainment. Buddha slices that off right at the beginning in his ordinary story, with the ordinary story. Then finally, in Lecture 7, I want to talk about the universal antidote to all things difficult, and that would be patience. Lecture 8, section 25 to 32, the themes, a closer look at the truth and concept of no ego. And ego is something that we could talk about forever and ever, I know, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to feed it. On the other hand, it's something that we do need to consider because it's a part of the Diamond Sutra. And I want to pause here to say that if you hear anything in the background, it's actually Bodhicitta, the dog, pretending that he has fleas. I just want to put it that way. Bodhi's a temple dog, so he's used to he sits every morning. He actually does meditation practice every morning. So when I came in here to do this lecture, he refused to be left outside because he figured I was coming in to do my meditation practice, and that meant he was coming in to do his meditation practice. So I apologize for any distraction that's related to the dog. Having said that, if he gets anywhere near me so I can show you how cute he is, I'll do that. All right, so Lecture 8 again, a closer look at the concept and truth of no ego, a bubble, a flash of lightning, and I'll end Lecture 8 with the role of joy. Lecture 9, the final lecture, by then we'll have read everything. We'll have read the sutra together. And I want to end the series with a one-person conversation. I'll just converse with myself, hopefully for your benefit, about how we can take this sutra to the streets. What's the so what of the Diamond Sutra? So in Lecture 9, we'll review the sutra's main components. Themes that I hope to cover are the meaning of going their ways. What does going their ways mean? Non-resistance, what does that mean? Non-resistance, again, is one of those great one-word teachings that encompass everything. Non-resistance, I think if I had to pick 3 words that summarize the Diamond Sutra, non-resistance would be one of them. Non-resistance to what is a hard-learned, what do I want to call it, habit. The importance of acts of kindness. Any impulse to help is an impulse to act on. So I'll talk about those kinds of things in lecture 9. And then lastly, if we were in a formal university environment and I was to give you a final exam, for those of you who insist on taking final exams, the final exam would be this. This is the last day of your life. Looking back, how has the Diamond Sutra impacted you? If it hasn't, why? What has taken its place? So that's the lecture series, and I hope you'll hang in there with me for the other 8 lectures. And let me just go through a couple more things and then we'll end, because this is feeling long to me, which makes me think it might be feeling long to you. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the Diamond Sutra itself, because it's just incredibly cool, and I'm going to lean down again and get another book. All right, so the Diamond Sutra, basically, let's see if I can get something that you can see here, is 7 panels of writing with one picture kind of leading the way. Here, let's see if you can see this. Can you see this? So this is what it looks like. And for those of you who are interested or can get access to a library, the title of this book, I'll show you the cover in a minute, is The Diamond Sutra, the story of the world's earliest dated printed book by Francis Wood and Mark Barnard. And that's the cover. Hopefully you can see it. It comes out of the British Library, and this was a gift to me that was given to me by Goho Vincenila, who is the present guiding teacher of Still Point Zen Buddhist Temple. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful story. So if you fall in love with the sutra the way I did, and you're greedy to spend more time with it or to learn more about it, then I encourage you to find this book. I just want to show you some of these great pictures in it. Look at these fellows. They're like the human guard dogs of the caves where they found these sutras. So the Diamond Sutra is the world's earliest printed book. It's one of the Wisdom Sutras. It was produced in AD 868, so 600 years before the Gutenberg Bible. The Diamond Sutra was out there. And not only was it out there, but when it was printed, there were thousands of copies. And the instructions were to give it away to anybody who wanted to study it. So it was around for a long time. But what happened was it ended up being hidden in a cave on the edge of the Gobi Desert. And the cave, the room where it was hidden, was patched up, so nobody knew that there was a room there. But it was actually discovered by a monk who saw a crack in the wall, and he opened it up, and then he found this cave that was filled, it was filled from the floor to the ceiling with all of these panels, these kind of parchment-y kinds of teachings that were all wrapped up and in piles in this cave. And word got out to a man named Sir Aurel Stein, S-T-E-I-N, who in the early 1900s just had it in him to go and look for these kinds of things. And he went into this cave, got permission to go into this cave, and found out that this really was something. He didn't really know what it was, but he knew it was something that was important. And what was interesting about this is when he found the Diamond Sutra scroll itself, it was surrounded by other scrolls. So it was actually kind of hard for him to figure out that these were important. It took a while for that to happen. But he took it back to India, and the government, back to the British Museum, and the government of India worked with the British Museum to try to find somebody who could translate it. Let's see if there's anything else. I want to tell you about that. There are actually 50,000 documents in that cave once they finally aired it all out. It was first translated into English in 1864? No, I have that wrong. in 1919 is when it made it into the British Museum. And from there on, I mean, people still are studying it and taking it apart now. And I've been told, I didn't see it. I actually had a chance to go to the museum and I didn't see it. But people have told me that they have seen it. So for those of you who can have the capacity and the good luck to head over to England, I'd love to know if you can actually really see it behind glass. It would really be something just to be able to look at it. What is it written in? You know what it's written in? It's written in kind of a sloppy Sanskrit. That's the best I can tell you. I'm going to finish by highlighting 6 terms that I think are critical terms to keep in the back of your mind while you read the sutra and think about the sutra. The first one is sutra. And sutra is really interesting. It's a word that really means thread. Why does this matter? It matters because, again, one of the things for me that's great about Buddhism is there isn't any one core teaching. I remember when I first went to the Ann Arbor Zen Buddhist Temple, I walked in the door and asked for a Bible. What was the Buddhist Bible? And people laughed. And it took me a while, actually, not to be irritated by their response, but one of the great things I realized over time was that all of the teachings offer something. All of the genuine teachings offer something, and that they are threads. So that the teaching itself is like this whole cloth made up of all these different threads. And by just understanding that a sutra is no more than a thread, it gives us permission to keep expanding our understanding of our own particular path. And that's really, really important. So sutra is one term, S-U-T-R-A. Bodhisattva. I'm sure all of you taking this class have heard the term bodhisattva. B-O-D-H-I-S-A-T-T-V-A. Bodhisattva. And the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra defines a bodhisattva as anyone who ceaselessly seeks enlightenment as well as the happiness and welfare of all. As well as the happiness and welfare of all. And that's one of the things that I know we use to differentiate Mahayana Buddhism from other forms of Buddhism. Although I have to tell you that my experience of all forms of Buddhism is that they have the same almost endpoint of wanting the happiness of all people. It just is something that emerges from all practices. Having said that, the bodhisattva is an expression that comes up all the time. I'm sure I'll mention it quite a bit as we move through these lectures together, but even if I don't, it's going to be something that'll be a part of your life if you continue along this path. For me, a bodhisattva basically means spiritual warrior. What I've noticed about my own practice is that it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to get up and meditate every day, so I'll be a better person. I mean, there's sort of an oomph behind that. But when I really think that I'm meditating for the whole world, that I'm really, really doing this, not just for this person called Geri Larkin, but for everybody and everything, it really helps me to get myself on that cushion and to watch what comes out of my mouth and to pay attention to what I'm thinking. So this whole concept of bodhisattva is really a helpful concept. And it's a big part of the Diamond Sutra. I mean, the very beginning of the Diamond Sutra is a story about Buddha manifesting his bodhisattva-hood, not just the Buddhahood, but how he was such a bodhisattva. Subhuti, moving through the sutra, and we'll talk about this story next time, is manifesting the same time. They're being bodhisattvas. So, absolutely critical. And there's a fearlessness to being a bodhisattva. There's something about that. You know, when I think of bodhisattvas, actually I have to say I think about my mother, because one of the aspects of being a bodhisattva is this fearlessness about calling what is what it is. And I have been in places where my mother's been the only person who, in the back of the room, has raised her hand to say, oh, you're lying. or, oh, you who, that's not okay. And that's part of what this means. The other kind of part of this fearlessness is a fearlessness that has to do with being willing to be the last person out, the one who turns the light off at the end of the day. And again, a wonderful story I heard from a friend of mine is that he has a monk that he studied with for a long time, a man who's still a monk in Japan. And one of his favorite expressions is after you, no matter where he is and no matter what he's doing. It's after you, oh, after you. He talks about how his experience of this whole Buddhist path is, that there's this bridge we have to cross, and it's this bridge of crossing, past our all our conditioning into emptiness, to this kind of pure awareness where we're available to the world. And he's at one end of the bridge when people are starting to walk across it, and he stands and he says, oh, after you, after you, after you. It's a great image for a bodhisattva. Diamond, the image of the diamond. I've talked about that a little bit. Why does diamond matter? Michael Roach, who is I think a Tibetan teacher, Roach, has taught a lot about the Diamond Sutra and this whole image of diamond. He actually worked in the diamond trade itself for a while. But the thing about a diamond is that it cuts through. So the Diamond Sutra is a sutra that cuts through delusions. Diamonds illuminate. They illuminate what is real. They can't be destroyed. Diamonds can't be destroyed. So this whole thing of not being destroyed, it's sort of this Dharma. It's interesting when you think about this, because the Dharma is something that's everywhere and everything and can't be destroyed. And we forget about that. I can remember when I did stink of Zen when I first came onto this path. I think within a year I bought maybe 30 books on Buddhism. That was back when I was a management consultant, so I had pretty good income. One of the books I bought was written by Bernie Glassman, who I think is still alive and was a wonderful, wonderful teacher. And I remember I drove 50 miles to a book signing that he was giving. And when I got there, there were only maybe, this is funny given who he is, but again, it was like 1988 in the Midwest. Maybe 25 people were there. And I rushed in and I wore my robes, my Buddhist monk robes, and went up to him and shook my hand and shook his hand. And I said, oh, I'm so happy I can be here. I just wanted to make sure that I could help you hold up the Dharma. And he, and so that's why I drove 50 miles to be here for you. And he looked at me and I watched him look at me. I was like, this man is looking at me like I'm completely crazy. And I remember he said something like, hold up the Dharma. I was like, I wonder how you do that. And it took me a long time to realize that that'd be like saying, okay, I have just driven 50 miles to help you hold up the air. Let me stand here and hold up this air. So diamond, that it permeates everything, everywhere, and it never stops illuminating. It's what's so important about this sutra. This sutra never stops illuminating. Okay, only 3 more. Shunyata. Shunyata is spelled Shunyata, and it means emptiness. And it refers to a direct mode of perception in which nothing is added or subtracted from the actual data perceived. So that's it. So pure perception, nothing added. No meanings, no labels, nothing subtracted, not taking out the parts that we don't understand, that we don't like, that don't suit us. It's just what is, no more, no less. Great emptiness. It's kind of this uncorrupted awareness of things. Very, very important. Again, the Diamond Sutra, if you read it very quickly over and over, many of you will have a taste of this literally through the act of reading the Diamond Sutra. Best read out loud to get this taste. Karuna, I'm sure most of you have heard of. If all of you haven't heard of it, Karuna, Karuna, one of the 4 great abodes. That means compassion. Compassion is a terrific word because it keeps us in the middle of everything that is. Compassion is about having open hearts with everything and everyone. So no up, no down, just great open heart. And the Diamond Sutra is all those things. And then the last word So the last term for today is upaya. It's U-P-A-Y-A, upaya. And it means skillful means. It's sort of a central working proposition of the Diamond Sutra, skillful means. There are lots of ways to read the Diamond Sutra with using just one theme. I mean, it's actually kind of fun to say, okay, I'm going to read the Diamond Sutra and look for upaya, or I'm going to read the Diamond Sutra and look for kind of everything that has to do directly with bodhisattva, or I'm going to read the Diamond Sutra and look just for emptiness. And what's interesting about this is if you read the Diamond Sutra looking for skillful means, what you'll discover is that it really is the central working proposition of the Diamond Sutra. And in fact, is the core organizing principle of the Mahayana. I mean, upaya is the bottom line here for how we manifest our awakening or our awareness or whatever you want to call it. So upaya is very, very important. All right, so to finish, the Diamond Sutra is really about the bodhisattva path and how our intention to awake and to help others to awaken leads us to practice steadily and sincerely, which again leads us to this whole shunyata or experience of emptiness, which leads us, and of course this is all intermingled and intermixed, but I've oversimplified it, but just to give you a sense of it. So the bodhisattva path, our intention to awaken and help others, leads us to practice, leads us to this cognition, our own taste of shunyata, you'll love it, which leads us to this experience of karuna, great compassion, which leads us to ta-da, upaya, skillful means. And that's where this whole practice meets the world where it is right now. Okay? So that's enough for one lecture. My goodness, I'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.